Welcome to the 26th episode of the Head Kick KO podcast. Today we're going to be taking a look at UFC 263, and there is a lot to talk about. But before we get into that, make sure you go follow my other social medias, Twitter, Head Kick KO Pod, TikTok, Head Kick KO Podcast. If you like this podcast, you should enjoy those social medias. I post a lot on there, and there's more during the week and during the fights. So if you're interested in this, that should be something that you are interested in as well. So, and just a disclaimer here, this episode is looking like it's going to be a long one. Didn't plan it out to be that way, but there's a lot to talk about. So before we start talking about some of these things, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what you're going to talk about so you can kind of jump around to the things that maybe you're more interested in if you're not 100% interested in some of these topics. So we're going to start off talking about the fans returning and the overall feel of this card. Then we're going to talk about the card of UFC 261. We're going to start at the main event and work our way down the card, and we're only going to be talking about the main card. Then after that, we're going to have some other news. We're going to talk about Izzy versus Vettori, Nick Diaz, Jon Jones, and the heavyweight title fight. And then Tyron Woodley. And then we're going to talk for a second about Jake Paul and DC and the little run-in they had. And then time permitting, we are going to talk about next week's fight card, which is Yiri Prochazka versus Dominic Reyes. And there's a lot of other fun fights on that card outside of the main event as well. So starting it off, this card felt electric. It was nice to have fans back. Originally, I wasn't too excited to have fans back. I liked the feel of the empty arena. I like to be able to hear all the punches and kicks, things like that. I like to be able to, hear cornermen, and it's more of it feels like you're almost in the fight. You can tell what's going on, it's easier to watch. You don't have to deal with crowd boos, things like that. You don't get the cringy little camera things where the UFC cuts over to the fans, the celebrity fans in the crowd. But I was pleasantly surprised here because these fans were electric. I mean, if there's ever a night to have fans back in the arena, tonight was the night. We had 5 finishes on the main card, and those moments wouldn't have been as special without the crowd. Whether they were good moments or bad moments, we had both, but those moments wouldn't have been as special without those fans. So I'm thrilled that we have fans back. I think this is a good move right now. We'll see how the COVID numbers what the COVID numbers are looking like after this, and we'll be able to know if everyone was safe or not. If the COVID numbers are good, then, this was a big success. And right now, I think just having pay-per-views being the only things with fans is a good move right now by the UFC, so we'll see how that plays out, and hopefully the COVID cases as a result of this aren't out of control, but we're going to have to wait and see before we get any of those numbers. So I just wanted to address that because my adrenaline was pumping the whole time, and this card felt amazing, and I think most people agree with me on that. It felt special, and it felt like a UFC pay-per-view, and I'm glad to have that feeling back. So just wanted to get that out of the way, as I feel like that's an important overarching thing to talk about. Now let's move into the main event of Kamaru Usman versus Jorge Masvidal. Before this fight, okay, I want to set this up here. Before this fight, we saw Kamaru has been growing as a fighter. Early in his career, he was just a wrestler who could dominate you wrestling. And then in the Colby Covington fight, he showed a really good jab, and that whole fight took place on the feet, and he eventually finished it in the 5th round. Then we had the Gilbert Burns fight, or we had the second Jorge fight, and that was, more clinch work and things like that, but he had a broken nose coming into that fight. And then we had the Gilbert Burns fight where he showed some very, very good striking. The jab looked excellent, and he had a nice pull counter in there. So the striking really improved going into the Gilbert Burns fight. So now we're leading into this Jorge Masvidal fight, and the question is, how much has his striking really improved? He's going in there with a top-tier striker. Many people think Masvidal is one of the best strikers in the UFC, And I'd say that's a fair sentiment. And we saw that in this fight as well. Those kicks to the leg, the kicks to the body, the burst punches that Masvidal throws. He's a tremendous striker regardless of what happened last night. And Usman went out there and won this fight on the feet. I mean, he did get one takedown in the first round, but when this fight was on the feet, he was landing the more powerful, more damaging shots. It looked like Jorge's plan was to chip away at the legs and the body, so maybe that has something to do with why Usman was landing more of the more damaging punches to the head. I mean, he landed a couple of really good jabs, some straight rights, and obviously that knockout was ridiculous. Masvidal has a great chin, and Usman landed a straight right from the reason this punch was so powerful here is the angle here. He lands this at a nice angle and he gets fully extended, and he punches through Masvidal's face. This isn't like he's not just throwing this out here. He threw that straight, fast, hard, with bad intent, and he landed, and that's gonna that'll put out anyone. That shot might put out a horse, who knows? But that shot will put out anyone. And this just goes to show once again how vast and how fast Kamaru Usman is still improving. I mean, if you go back and look at the Colby Covington fight, that was 100% stand-up. Then you go and look at this fight. I mean, he looks like a different fighter on the feet. And a lot of that, there's two people to give this credit to. First, obviously, Kamaru Usman. I mean, when you're improving, you're a large portion of the credit because, he works hard and he saw that striking was a weakness in his game. He heard the critiques and he went out there and fixed that hole better than maybe any wrestler in MMA ever has. I mean, we've always had wrestlers with good takedowns, but the development that we've seen in the striking department is probably the best. From where he started to where he is now, the improvements is probably the most improvements we've seen by a fighter. Second person you have to give credit to for that is Trevor Wittman. Trevor Wittman is a tremendous coach. I mean, it feels like this was a match made in heaven here for Kamaru and Trevor Wittman, because Trevor Wittman's an expert striking coach, bringing in a dominant wrestler, someone with great cardio, teach them great striking. And, I mean, that's exactly what he did. And it has paid off with knockouts over Gilbert Burns, Colby Covington, and Jorge Masvidal. Those are three fighters with good chins. Masvidal was only knocked out one other time in his career, and that fight was in a ring. That wasn't in a cage. It wasn't in an octagon. That fight took place in a ring. So that's how long ago that was. So Masvidal's been a tough chin to crack, and Usman cracked it. Okay? Simple as that. And just some more praise for Trevor Wittman before we talk about Usman some more. Wittman is possibly the best coach in MMA right now in terms of developing fighters' skill sets and coming with a game plan. Trevor Wittman is top tier. If you look at what Gaethje did to Tony Ferguson, no one's ever beat Tony like that. I mean, Charles Oliveira was very dominant in his Tony fight, but he did it in a different manner. Gaethje outworked Tony on the feet, landing big shots. If you look at the Rose versus Weili fight that I'm going to talk about in a little bit, that's another example of Trevor Wittman, his pure skill as a coach coming in to play there. So Trevor Wittman's a top-tier coach in MMA, and, I mean, he may be the best. And I don't want to, it's hard to say who the best coach is because I feel like, guys like Trevor Wittman and, Firas Zahabi, they all have their certain style of fighter. Coaching isn't so much about, it's about how well you can connect with a fighter and help a fighter specifically. So I think that coaching is, one coach, it's hard to be the best coach for everybody, but the fighters that he is working with are top-notch fighters, and they're constantly improving. So big respects to Trevor Wittman, as he's one of the best coaches in the game right now, regardless. Back to Kamaru. Another thing that I want to address here, because I was still very impressed with this, is he didn't fall in love with his hands, okay? That's something that has hurt many people in the past, most notably Ronda Rousey. If you look at Ronda, she was a world-class grappler, and she fell in love with her hands, and she lost some fights because of that. And I know there's some other problems with Ronda striking, but she fell in love with the hands, and she paid for it. Usman has yet to fall in love with his hands. He is far better on the feet, and he's more comfortable on the feet, but he still got that takedown in the first round. The willingness to go for the takedown and advance position and land ground and pound on the ground. And he didn't just say, oh, I'm comfortable with this whole fight being on the feet. Because Usman may be better than fighters on the feet, but he's better than everybody on the ground and in that weight class, more than likely. I mean, it's tough to say. You have Maia, who is a BJJ guy. You have Covington, who's also a great wrestler. You have Chiesa, who's very good on the ground. Burns, very good on the ground. But I don't think there's going to be a fight where Usman has a disadvantage on the ground. So for him not to just throw all the wrestling out and fall in love with the improvements he's made on the feet is a great sign. And if he can continue mixing that wrestling and those hands, he's going to be a problem as long as he keeps mixing those things. And for Usman's next fight, I mean, as long as he keeps improving, it's going to be tough to seeing anyone at 170 beat him. And that raises the question, what's next? So Dana seemed pretty keen on Colby Covington. I don't know I don't know why he seemed so keen on that, because if Dana has been saying Colby Covington's next, why wasn't that fight made after the Gilbert Burns fight? They last fought in 2019. He beats Woodley. Why is it now that it's all of a sudden that Colby is the next guy for sure? I don't know why. We're going to have to wait and see, but I don't think that if this fight gets made in the next 2 weeks, it's going to be Colby Covington getting that title shot. But that's not necessarily the case here, because we're going to see Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz, and one of those guys could swoop in and steal this fight. We're going to see Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Gilbert Burns, and if Wonderboy wins, he can come in and he can steal that title shot. So if this fight gets booked, the sooner this fight gets booked, the more likely that we see Usman versus Covington. The later we wait, the more likely it's Leon. The more likely it's Nate Diaz. The more likely it's someone or more likely it's Wonderboy. I don't think we see the Gilbert Burns rematch right away, because he finished that fight pretty convincingly. So I don't think I think Gilbert needs another win other than Wonderboy to earn that title shot. But if he can get 2, maybe he'll be back in there, but that's going to be later than the next title shot, so we'll cross that road when we get there. But like I said, Wonderboy is fighting Gilbert Burns. I guess that fight isn't until July, so that's probably not the fight to look at for that. But Diaz and Leon Edwards is coming up soon. Let me check the date on that just to be sure. But it's hard to say that Leon Edwards doesn't deserve a title shot if he beats Nate Diaz. I mean, Masvidal got a title shot after beating Nate Diaz, and Leon Edwards has been on a long, long run here. So it'd be hard to not give Leon Edwards that shot. That is booked for May 15th. May 15th, we have Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz. So if this fight's booked before May 15th, it's going to Covington. If it's booked after May 15th, it's probably going to go to the winner of Leon Edwards versus Nate Diaz. And it's tough to say Nate Diaz doesn't deserve a title shot if he beats Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards, many people think right now is the best outside of Usman. I think if we had to have a conversation of who is the best outside of Usman, it would be in between Colby and Leon. But, Colby already got that fight once as a title opportunity. I know Leon has fought Usman in the past, but that was a long time ago when they were both coming up. So that almost, I get, technically counts, but it doesn't really count for these two. Neither of them were at their peaks. So, it's tough to say that the winner of Leon Edwards and Nate Diaz doesn't deserve a title shot over someone like Colby. So, and I know people don't want to see Nate Diaz in a title fight, but like I said, beating Leon Edwards right now, Nate Diaz's stock is really low in terms of fans, the hardcore fans. He didn't look great against Masvidal, but like I said, beating Leon Edwards will propel him, and he'll have the height that he did after the Pettis fight. So it's all about whether he can go out there and pull off that upset. If he does, title, if he wants it. So it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of moving pieces here. We're going to talk about Nick Diaz later. He's a big moving piece in this division. Who knows where the UFC wants to go with Nick Diaz? We also have Masvidal, and Masvidal is going to be in a big fight. Is that big fight Colby? Is that big fight, say, Nate Diaz? If he loses, Masvidal's options aren't closed here either. So it would almost be smarter for the UFC to wait and see who wins that May 15th fight. Because if, for example, if Leon beats Nate, there's many roads you could go here. You could have a card that this would be an amazing card later in the year. Leon beats Nate. You do Usman versus Leon in the main event, and then you have Colby versus Masvidal in a 5-round co-main. And, you could do Nick versus someone on that card, but mainly the co-main and main. That would be electric. Usman, Edwards, Covington, Masvidal. Those would be some great fights back to back. That'd be electric. So I think, like I said this once, but I'm going to reiterate it before we move on here. If this is booked before May 15th, it goes to Covington. After May 15th, it goes to the winner of Diaz, or it goes to the winner of Edwards and Diaz. So, moving on, Rose Namajunas versus Weili Zhang. What can I say? Other than head kick KO? Who doesn't love a good head kick KO? I know I love myself a good head kick KO, but hey, that's just me. And I'm a big Weili fan. I'm not gonna hide that, but I love Weili, but I also love a good foot smacking off a chin. So. I said before this fight last week's episode, I said if you comment your Venmo on the YouTube and we see a head kick KO, I'll Venmo you $15. However, no one commented their Venmo on the YouTube, so they lost out on $15. So whatever. Anyways, there was something about this that just made this feel special. I don't know if it was just the energy in the crowd, or I don't know what it was, but when Rose finished this fight, it just felt special and perfectly set up. This was hidden. Snuck in there, smacked Weili off the jaw with her foot, and it was, after then it was good night. And Weili was first off, Weili was looking good before this. She was doing a really good job hitting those inside low kicks. She wasn't able to get inside yet. Rose was doing a good job of managing range. But Weili still looked good up until this point. But there's not much you can do when someone like Rose is sneaking in a head kick that sneaky with that much power behind it is going to put your lights out, because she didn't see it coming at all. And those are the shots that hurt you. That had pinpoint placement. There's two ways you can pinpoint a head kick, kind of. The first and more ideal way is shin off jaw, and then the back of the foot coming around and wrapping around the back of the head. That's the more ideal way, but you also have the top of the foot coming here off the jaw. So that's also another very pinpoint placement, and that's what we saw Rose do. So pinpoint placement without seeing it coming, it's going to put you down. Weili was not happy with the stoppage. But, I think that's a situation of she just got knocked out, and, she's a warrior. If Weili is conscious, I don't think she wants a fight stopped. So I think if she goes back and watches this, she's not going to be as upset. But this is the age-old case of, hey, we interviewed a fighter after she was knocked out. So, I don't take what a fighter says 100% after if a fighter says something sincere after they've been knocked out, then it's cool. But if a fighter says something silly and Joe Rogan interviews them just after they got knocked out, I kind of don't hold it against them. For example, Masvidal, after he got knocked out, he said respect to Kamaru, and he told his kids he was fine. Stand up move by Masvidal. Weili, after she got knocked out, seemed a little upset, and I don't hold that against Weili, because, anytime you go through damage like that, putting a microphone in the face right away probably isn't the best move, But, sometimes it works out with Jorge, and it worked out well after Conor lost. And there's other instances. Sometimes it doesn't work out well. Weili, Overeem. It happens, and we'll just have to, I guess we kind of have to play it by ear. But, Weili, it happens. So what is next for Rose Namajunas? This is a tough one to matchmake because there is a lot of talented fighters in the female 115-pound weight class, but there is no clear-cut number one contender. I mean, looking at the rankings here, we have Weili is going to be number one on Tuesday with Joanna at 2, and then we have Yao Xiaonan taking on Carla Esparza and the dark horse Mackenzie Dern. That's the top 5, and no one really, to me, jumps out and says, we have to make this fight. It could go a lot of ways, and Yao Xiaonan and Carla Esparza are going to have an opportunity here. They're fighting each other. I don't know the date of that fight off the top of my head. I will look for it real quick. But, if the winner of that fight can go out there and put on a very good performance, they can make a strong case that they deserve a title shot. It all depends on the performance. If this is a one-sided kind of domination or a finish, then yes, they could squeak into that title shot. Let's see here. 522. So that fight is... You just watched me do dates in my head. 522. That's on the Rob Font versus Cody Garbrandt card. There it is. I don't know why I passed it when I was looking. Okay, that's besides the point. They're fighting on May 22nd. So May 22nd, we'll have some more answers. If someone wins this fight, with a nice submission or a knockout or a very dominant performance, I think they would do enough to earn a title shot. But if this is a, not a great fight, the winner doesn't necessarily get it. If someone can go out there and put a stamp on this, they get it. If we don't see that stamp, we don't get it. And it's going to be a big question. And I think it's a toss-up if that happens, because the winner of that would still be in the conversation. But you also have to look, do we do Joanna? She almost won the belt back in about a year ago now. She almost won that fight. It was fight of the year. Do you look at Weili and say, well, Weili had a very good run as champion at 115. Do we give her the immediate rematch? And I think this is going to probably be one of the situations where the UFC says, name doesn't matter, really. We've seen that as of late in the UFC, unfortunately, is they're looking to put the championship on a date and the contender doesn't really matter. And unfortunately, that has seemed more prominent in the female divisions. Andrade earned it, but they kind of just threw Amanda in there, with Megan without really earning it necessarily. They've done it in the past. So they might just figure out, hey, we want to see Rose back whatever day, and, whoever is willing to step in and fight that day, they'll have a list, and they'll run through that list, and, the person on the top gets the first opportunity, and they'll work their way down. So it's going to be interesting to see. I think this is going to be a close one, and it's going to be a toss-up, so we'll have to wait and see, I guess. And for Weili, maybe she gets a title shot next. Maybe, if Yao Xiaonan or Carla Esparza can go out there and put a stamp on this one, maybe they do Joanna versus Weili 2, which would be a great fight for another opportunity at the belt. Maybe they look at giving Mackenzie Dern a top 5 opponent. You never know. But we'll stop speculating on that because we went kind of down a wormhole there, but that's all right. And then the third fight down, we had Jessica Andrade versus Valentina Shevchenko, and my God, did Valentina look amazing. Coming into this fight, the place where people thought Andrade could win would be as if Andrade could get inside, get in the clinch, get takedowns, get some time on top, win some rounds on top, have some nice ground and pound. what I just described as people thought what Andrade needed to do to win, what I just described is exactly what Valentino went out there and did. She didn't have to do that. I feel like this was a statement win because Valentina didn't need that. She didn't need to go out and do that to win. She could have easily stayed on the feet and picked Jessica Andrade apart from a distance because she was doing that when it was on the feet at distance, picking her apart. She could have done that, but she didn't. She chose to take the path that people thought would be her weakness and dominate in that aspect. And that begs the question of who can beat Valentina Shevchenko. Oh, side note, crucifix position, hard to get to as we know, but when you get there, good Lord, that'll put someone's light. No, not put the lights out, but it makes for a bad night if you get put in a crucifix, and the end of the fight is usually coming. So good on Valentina for getting in that dominant position, and it was impressive. So what's next for Valentina? It's tough to say because right now I feel like the only competitive fight is Amanda Nunes. And you could make the case that another competitive fight could be a 115-pounder moving up, but she's already beat Joanna. Weili would be a challenge, but she just lost. I think she needs to stay at 115 for now. You have Rose. Rose and Valentina are very friendly with each other. I don't know if they would fight each other. I don't know if that's something Rose wants to do. And Rose would be very undersized in that fight. Mackenzie Dern, if she can iron out her striking a little more, maybe she moves up to 125. And, maybe she has a chance to pull off a submission. But, I'm not overly sold on any of these girls other than Amanda Nunes beating Shevchenko. If you look at what we've got here, we've got Andrade, Caitlin Chikagan, both already lost. Jennifer Maia is lost. And that leaves you Lauren Murphy, Cynthia Calvillo, Joanne Calderwood, Viviana Juno, Jessica Ai, Roxanne Modafferi, Alexa Grasso. I just don't see any of these women beating Valentina, I think if Arjuno can get a win, I'm pretty sure she's taking on Chikagan here soon. Lauren Murphy, is she fighting Calderwood? I think that's the fight they made. Let me double check on that. So, the winner of, Lauren Murphy, I don't think Lauren Murphy really has what it takes to go out there and beat Valentina. I don't think Joanne Calderwood has what it takes to go out there and beat Valentina. She looked that good, Yeah, we have Joanne Calderwood versus Lauren Murphy in June, on June 12th. So I don't see any of those. I think the only challenge is Nunes. And I think those are the only two girls that can really test and challenge each other. Is Nunes and Shevchenko. And Dana didn't seem too keen on making that matchup. So we might see it. He said he'd make the matchup if both Amanda and Valentina came to him and said they wanted the fight. He said he'd make the fight, but it didn't seem like something that he would want to pursue. Maybe we see it, maybe we don't, but it doesn't look like we're going to see it right now. I guess we're just going to have to wait this one out, and it looks like the next shot is going to go to the winner of Lauren Murphy versus Joanne Calderwood. So I guess that's just the way it is. And then next fight on the card was Uriah Hall versus Chris Weidman. I mean, there isn't much to say here. I mean, we went out there. Chris Weidman threw a leg kick. Uriah Hall, textbook, check. Leg snaps. Gruesome injury. It's, there isn't much to say here. All we can do is wish Chris Weidman a speedy recovery. I'm not going to sit here and speculate. A lot of people were speculating on whether Weidman would be able to return from this, but, we're going to have to wait and see. He's having surgery today. The only update was that he was having surgery. So we're going to wishing the best to Chris Weidman, and that's all we can do. And I'm not going to talk about a lot of people were talking about, Weidman and, he did this to Silva, and Uriah's last fight was against Silva, and making all these connections. It's not really worth it. And the moral of the story, Chris Weidman, got a leg kick checked and broke his leg in a vicious manner. So, wishing a speedy recovery to Chris Weidman. Hopefully Uriah Hall can get in there again soon. I think everyone wants to see Uriah Hall fight. What's next for Uriah Hall? I mean, a lot of these guys at 185 are booked. He kind of got a raw end of the deal here. I mean, they're not going to give him a shot against someone. They gave him 11, Chris Weidman, when he was 9. Jack Hermanson and Edmund Shabazian are fighting. They're 7-10. Till's got a broken collarbone. They're probably not going to let him move up in the rankings to fight someone as high as Brunson or Costa. Vettori got a title shot. Cannonier is still recovering from an injury, and they wouldn't give him number 4 anyways. We don't know. I'd love Uriah Hall versus Kevin Holland. My God, that'd be a fun fight. But we still haven't gotten the answer as to what Kevin Holland's doing. It looks like he's taking time off to work on his wrestling. We don't know if he's moving down to 170 or not. So that fight looks like Kevin Holland is going to be on the shelf for a while. Weidman's at 11. He's going to be shelved for a while. Omari Akhmedov, Brad Tavares, and Sean Strickland. Maybe one of those guys. Kelvin Gastelum's going to be on the shelf for a while. Hall's in a tough spot here. He might have to fight an unranked guy or, someone 13 through 15. But unfortunately for Uriah Hall, it looks like he's getting the tough end of it looks like he's getting the raw end of the deal here. And it's not his fault, but, sometimes those things happen. So, I mean, there isn't much else to say here. Anthony Smith versus Jimmy Coote. This was top prospect versus someone a lot of people are calling a gatekeeper, but Anthony Smith looked very good, and I don't think it's fair to call him a gatekeeper. Jab was looking great. I'll be honest, I had troubles getting this. We had some internet problems during this fight. I saw most of it, but I did have some problems watching this fight, so I, was in and out of there. But from what I saw, Smith was looking really good. Coote was looking good as well. Both these guys were looking good. It was looking like it was going to be a fun fight. Then Anthony Smith lands a textbook perfect leg kick. And when those things happen, there's going to be damage. And Coote is a very tough guy, and he wanted to continue. And at the end of the first round, he got those takedowns. He got some top control. He was doing what he needed to do to stay in that fight. He almost made it out there for the second round. Then last second, he had a knee buckle. And, doctor waves it off. Is it a good call to wave it off? I don't know. Because this can be one of two things. It can be nerve damage or it can be ligament damage. If it's nerve damage, he can keep fighting, because there isn't any sustained damage here. The leg is just numb. If it's ligament damage, then things only get worse. You can't tell if it's a nerve or a ligament while you're in there, I don't think. So, better to be safe than sorry. Jimmy Coote's a young guy with a long career ahead of him. So, for the longevity of his career, this was probably the right move. This doesn't set him back too far, as a lot of people, me included, are still high on Jimmy Coote's stock. I think he's still a great prospect with just a hiccup here that he couldn't do much about. So, I mean, we'll see. What's next for Coote? It all depends. Is that ligament damage, or was it a nerve? Two very different things, and we don't know yet. So we don't know how long the return is going to take. What's next for Anthony Smith? Anthony Smith. We have Prochazka versus Reyes coming up next week. Anthony Smith versus a lot of these guys sounds really fun. Santos versus Smith would be fun, I think. Magomed Ankalaev versus Anthony Smith would be fun. I think that's the direction that I'd want to see this go. Anthony Smith versus Magomed Ankalaev. Ankalaev's looking like a very good prospect. if Anthony Smith can go out there and get another win. Magomed he's borderline prospect, borderline contender. He's number 7. He's looked good. A lot of people call him a prospect. He's done a lot to prove himself as a fighter. So, what's next? I'd like to see Ankalaev. Give Ankalaev an opportunity. Give Anthony Smith an opportunity to take out a highly respected guy. Maybe Thiago Santos. That'd be a fun fight as well. Both those fights sound good to me. And I think that's probably around the direction they go in. Unless he wants to get in there super early again, they could throw him. Jamal Hill would be a dark horse here. If Jamal Hill can go out and put a stamp on Paul Craig, then he could maybe get a shot against someone in the top of those rankings. We'll just have to wait and see how that fight plays out this weekend. That's all we have for UFC 260. Well, that's all we have from the fights at UFC 261. Now we're going to move into some other news. First off, Israel Adesanya versus Marvin Vettori was booked for June 12th at UFC 263. And it looked like a simple process. It looked like Izzy said, hey, I want to return June 12th. Dana said, all right, we'll get you a fight. First name on the list, Robert Whitaker. They call Rob up and they say, hey, Rob, June 12th, you and Izzy. Rob says, no, too early of a turnaround. Rightfully so. He was just in a 5-round main event, and he's got to go home. He has to quarantine for 2 weeks when he gets home, and then training, coming back. That's a tough ask for June, and you can't book the fight in July because you have Conor in July, and Conor kind of holds up pay-per-views because you can't put another title fight on a Conor pay-per-view if Conor doesn't have a title. Just how it goes. And then August, pushing it 2 months back to August, I don't know if Izzy wanted to wait that long, so that's probably July. August is probably the earliest for Robert Whitaker to return. And I mean, the UFC didn't want to wait that long. Maybe Izzy didn't want to wait that long. So they moved to the next guy in line, and the next guy in line was Marvin Vettori. So Rob still deserves this title shot. He does. And I think, nobody's going to disagree with that. And I think that has to be the next fight after this. After this, Vettori versus Israel, regardless of what happens, even if Vettori wins, we need to see Rob get a title shot. Beating Till, Cannonier, Gastelum earns you a title shot. Losing your title and then beating Till and Cannonier should get you a title shot. Doing that and then tacking on Kelvin Gastelum too, Rob far and away deserves a title shot, and there's nothing more to say than that. Hopefully they don't try and screw him, because maybe they do Till versus Brunson or Till versus... They want Till to get that title shot bad. Izzy wants Till to get that title shot bad. Hopefully they don't screw Rob. But Rob, my advice, and who am I to give Robert Whitaker advice, but don't take another fight, because if Rob takes another fight, we could be in the same situation where, Rob isn't ready to return. He can go out there and put on another masterclass performance, but if he's not ready the date they want him to be ready, then he's not going to get that fight, and that was proven in this situation. So, Rob, don't take another fight. Wait for that title shot. You deserve it. You earned it. Not much more to say than that. Then, possibly the biggest news, most surprising news, Nick Diaz was at UFC 261 in Jacksonville. A reporter asked, hey, we saw Nick was here. Dana said, yeah, he wants to fight. The reporter said, are you going to get him a fight? Dana said, sure. They said, when does he want to fight? Who does he want to fight? And Dana said, I don't know. I got to go talk to him. He said he was going to talk to him right afterwards. So that's a big, big return would be for having Nick Diaz back in the UFC. And it's a tough situation. Who do you book Nick Diaz against? Because if you look at Nick Diaz, he's so incredibly talented. He hasn't fought in forever, though. His last fight was against Anderson Silva, I believe. And that fight was overturned to a no contest anyways. Yeah, he's coming off. He fought Anderson Silva in 2015. And then he fought George St. Pierre and Carlos Condit in 2013 and 2012. Lost both those fights. Before that, he's got wins over BJ Penn, Paul Daly. So the question is, who is the fight? Do we, give him a warm-up fight against a Cowboy Cerrone, a Robbie Lawler, someone of that nature, or do we throw him to the wolves and give him, Masvidal? Do we throw him to the wolves, give him Luque? There's fun fights. Nick Diaz versus Luque, Masvidal would be some fun fights there. I don't think it's interesting to. Do we see Jorge versus Nick Diaz? I don't know. Because Nick always said the counterfight was always Nate's fight. When people were talking about, we can see Nick come back and fight Conor, he always said that's Nate's fight. Does he feel the same way with the Jorge? Does he feel like, hey, that's Nate's fight? I'm not going to take that from Nate. That's Nate's. That's a possibility. And there's so many fun fights for Nick Diaz. And what weight class? Is it 170? Is my guess, because it's weird to see Nate and Nick in the same weight class, but 170, I mean, he was there last night, so, that was a 170 main event. So, do we see Colby Covington versus Nick Diaz? That'd be a cardio masterclass. But also at the same time, how much is Nick Diaz weighing? Because I saw a picture of Nick Diaz. Maybe you've seen the picture of Nick Diaz. He's not looking big, but he's looking lean. Lean. And when I mean lean, like distinct abs, very little body fat. Can he make 155? Because if Nick Diaz can make 155, oh my God. If Nick Diaz can make 155, there's a whole boatload of fights that I want to see Nick Diaz in. Just looking at these rankings now. Paul Felder versus Nick Diaz. God, that'd be fun. Dan Hooker versus Nick Diaz. God, that'd be fun. RDA versus Nick Diaz. God, that'd be fun. Conor McGregor. Like I said, probably not ever going to see that because, like Nick said, that's Nate's fight. Nick Diaz versus Tony Ferguson. Good Lord, that's a fun fight. Nick Diaz versus Poirier. Nick Diaz versus Gaethje. Those are all fun fights. There's so many options at 155 for Nick if he wants to go to 155. So, I don't know. There's so many question marks here that I feel silly sitting here and talking about what are we going to see with Nick Diaz, because we don't know. We don't know if it's 155, if it's 170, if it's 185. I doubt it's 185. Nick Diaz didn't have the best frame when he was at 185. I think we need to see 170 is most likely, but I think he could make 155. And if he makes 155, that shows he's committed to fighting in the UFC. Nick is always a hard worker, but taking the steps to make 155 would be tremendous. And then we wouldn't have Nick and Nate in the same weight class. We wouldn't have them, clashing for fights. And there's so many fun fights at 150. You could throw a dart. You could throw two darts at 155, and you're getting a great fight. I mean, good Lord, there's so many fun fighters. We're just gonna have to wait and see, I guess. Like I said, I feel silly doing this, but I'm looking at the rankings. I have the rankings right here on my computer, and all I'm seeing is fun fights for Nick Diaz. But let me end by saying this. I think Nick Diaz needs to, before we get too excited, I got a little ahead of myself there, just naming off fun fights, because good Lord, there's a lot of them. Give him Robbie Lawler, give him Cowboy Cerrone, maybe not Diego Sanchez, maybe Matt Brown, maybe Carlos Condit. Give him someone who's a little bit older and not at the top of their game right now, and let him prove himself. It feels weird saying let Nick Diaz prove himself, but I feel like it'd be irresponsible to throw him in there with a high top level guy right away after 5 years. Because if he's at the same level, it'll be a competitive fight. If he's not at the same level, it's not going to be a pretty thing to watch. So first off, let's make sure that Nick is still Nick, and these last 5 years haven't taken a toll on him in terms of skill and speed and things like that. I'm sure he'll be in great shape. Let's make sure all those things are in place, and then then open up the board to these fun fights. So, and I hope we see Nick Diaz soon. Hell, I hope they throw Nick Diaz on the same card as Nate, and I hope they put him the third fight down and give him a 5-round fight too. Just make it crazy. Make the Nick Diaz return crazy. Hell, put him as the co-main on the Conor card and give him a 5-round fight. That'd be electric. The return of Nick Diaz and then the Poirier and Conor trilogy. There's so many fun things you can do with Nick, and it makes me excited just sitting here thinking about it. Some news that's not as fun as a Nick Diaz return is Jon Jones. I never like talking about Jon Jones news because it's never good news. What's next for Jon Jones? We talk about it. Heavyweight title shot. Dana said Jon Jones wanted $30 million. Jon said, hey, I never said I wanted $30 million. Then a reporter says, hey, Dana, Jon says that was a lie. Dana said, whatever. So it looks like, according to the UFC, Jon is asking for too much money. Jon declines asking for that much money. I'm not going to get into all the fine point details here because, you'll go crazy trying to get a story straight between Dana White and Jon Jones. Neither of those two are the most trustworthy person you've ever ran into. Hell, they might both be lying. Who knows? Who knows? Oh, excuse me. But Jon Jones, the one thing we do know for sure is he's probably not going to be fighting for the UFC heavyweight title. Love it or hate it, we're probably going to see Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou, and we're going to have to live with it, and then maybe after that we'll see Jon. It doesn't look like the UFC is over eager to pay Jon the amount of money he wants to be paid, and it doesn't look like Jon is over eager to lower his price tag, and when those two things are present at the same time, the chance of a Jon Jones fight anytime soon is not great. We may never see Jon Jones fight in the UFC again, unless one of these sides changes their mind. So, there isn't much else to say here. Another note about Jon Jones. Here's my prediction. Tuesday, UFC rankings come out. Kamaru Usman is going to be the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter. And then Jon is going to go on a Twitter rant. That's just my prediction. That's my prediction. Who knows if it'll happen? I think it'll happen. Jon Jones loves his number 1 pound-for-pound spot. And it looks like Usman earned it last night. So, let's wait and see. But might be some fireworks there. Who knows? Another piece of news here. Tyron Woodley was removed from the UFC rankings. So, it's looking like the UFC did not elect to re-sign Tyron Woodley. And he is no longer in the UFC. It was a great run. I was never the biggest Tyron Woodley fan, but over the last couple months, he has grown on me a lot. He went out there against Luke, and he went down with the shield, throwing from the hip, giving it everything he had. And then he gets into these little run-ins with Jake Paul, and he's been sunning Jake Paul for the last couple weeks. So maybe that's a fight we see, Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley. I hope we see it because, God, Tyron Woodley melts that boy. Tyron Woodley would melt Jake Paul with one overhand right and poof, never have to hear Jake Paul's name again. So that'd be fun. But until then, we're going to have some Jake Paul shenanigans. Last week, I believe it was last week, I said I wasn't going to talk about Jake Paul, but I have to talk about this because DC absolutely sunned Jake Paul. Jake Paul was in the crowd. He starts pointing at DC. DC says, hey, Jake Paul better stop pointing at me because I don't play those games. I'll go over there and smack him right now. Then the crowd starts chanting, F Jake Paul. I'm not going to swear because YouTube doesn't like that, but you know what I'm saying. And so, then after that, in between the ending of the prelims and the beginning of the pay-per-view, DC gets out of his commentary seat, goes over there and gets in Jake Paul's face, puts his finger in his face, starts talking to Jake Paul. Jake Paul was there with his 2 bodyguards, so he wasn't too scared. I bet he was a little scared, but he's got his bodyguards with him. Of course, Jake Paul, after all this tough talk, would have to pull up with bodyguards because, there's some rough dudes running around. I wouldn't want to run into some of these guys after talking the shit I talked, in between Nick Diaz and DC and Colby Covington. Those guys are all in the building. You know, I guess him and Masvidal are kind of friendly with each other. But, you know, I don't know. Gaethje was there. I don't know which one of these guys would have been willing to go and give Jake Paul a nice little smack on the mouth. But I bet there would have been enough dudes. I bet there was a handful of dudes there willing to give Jake Paul a smack. So he pulled up with his bodyguards. DC went up, talked to him. I don't know what he said. We haven't seen that video footage. There was a big close up to Jake Paul and DC, but you couldn't hear what they were saying. The only things I heard were DC saying, "Keep my name out your mouth." Then Jake Paul saying that DC talked about him first. So, I mean, that's all I heard, and there wasn't. The crowd noise was so loud. When DC's in Jake Paul's face, the crowd's going wild. So, there's not too much information as to what exactly was said, but, you know, to get out of your commentary seat, go confront Jake Paul for being an idiot, and then going back and continuing the job you're getting paid millions to do. That's a big win for DC. DC's on that boy. Period. I don't like how I said period at the end there. Didn't mean for it to sound like that. Oh, so Jake Paul did get sunned by DC. End of that story. Now, we're at 51 minutes, so we have enough time left here to talk about next week's fight card, which is looking like a good one for a fight night card. Fight night cards can be hit or miss sometimes, but it's looking like this one is good. From the outside, this one's looking like a hit. We have Dominic Reyes versus Yiri Prochazka in the main event. This is Dominic Reyes, who almost beat Jon Jones. This is Yiri Prochazka, top, up-and-coming, former prospect, now contender, Yiri Prochazka. Both guys, knockout power. Both guys, great strikers. It's going to be a fun one. Yiri Prochazka, world-class kickboxer. Dominic Reyes, athlete. Dominic Reyes is an athlete. You don't care if you're a world-class kickboxer. So, Dominic Reyes versus Yiri Prochazka. This is a toss-up for me because both these guys are so talented. And we have on one hand, Dominic Reyes. Dominic Reyes is an interesting. It's a tough to predict this fight because we have the fight where he wins 2 rounds against Jon Jones, make the case he wins 3. You have the other fight where he gets beat up by Jan Blachowicz. Which Dominic are we going to see? If we see the down we saw against Jon Jones, he goes and wins this fight. If we see the down we saw against Blachowicz, it's going to be a long night for him. Sitting here now, which one of those guys do we see? I don't know. It's pretty tough to know here. But it's, what I can tell you for sure is I'm excited to see which one we get. Because if we get the Jon Jones, Dominic Reyes, we've got another fun guy running around at the 205-pound weight class. Then, in the featherweight co-main event, we have the legend Cub Swanston versus Gigachikaze. Took me 8 tries to say that. Giga holds a special place in my heart because he was the first fighter to get a head kick KO after I started the Head Kick KO podcast. So, Giga's got a special place in my heart, but who doesn't love Cub Swanston? I can tell you one thing, this is gonna be a banger, ladies and gentlemen. Giga is a top-level kickboxer, great kicks. Cub Swanston is a veteran of the fight game, and he's going to bring the fight to Giga. And if Giga can win this one, we have another great fighter in this 145-pound division. Even if Cub wins, he's proven he's not going anywhere. So, lots of fun fights. Light heavyweight, also on this card, Coote versus Dustin Jacoby. Coote is must-watch television going up against Dustin Jacoby. All I know is it's going to be a fun one. Sean Strickland going up against Jokov. Once again, Sean Strickland's a fun fighter to watch. Kind of a dirtbag. I don't know why I said that, but he's a fun fighter to watch. And Sean Strickland has been making moves in this division, and Jutkov hasn't fought in a long time. So I'm excited to see him back because he has been, on the sidelines for a minute, but he's a really good fighter. So fun fight there. Then we have Marab versus Cody Stemmon, Cody Stemmon is I'm quite sure that he went to Grand Valley. So my pick on this one, Cody Stemmon. If you don't know, I go to Grand Valley, and I'm from Michigan. Cody Stemmon, also from Michigan, went to Grand Valley. So gotta pull for Cody in this one. Sorry, Marab. Do love Marab, but got them ties. The prelims aren't looking as great as the main card. To be honest, not the most exciting prelims I've ever seen on a fight night card. If you're watching, you just saw me almost knock over my microphone. If you're listening, you heard me almost knock over my microphone. But that's all right here, because we've got a fun fight card next week, and I'm ready for it. What do we got here? 5 fun fights on the main card. That should be some 6 fights on the main card. So, you know what? I think that is all I have to say today. Make sure you tune in to UFC Fight Night. Dominic Reyes versus Yiri Prochazka. It's on ESPN too, not even on ESPN Plus. And side notes. Next week, 2 weeks, we have Corey Sandhagen versus TJ Dillashaw. There's about 10 fights that I would do terrible things to see. Unnamely things to see. There's a list of those fights, Max Holloway versus Tony Ferguson. Dan Hooker versus Eddie Alvarez. There's some fights that I would do ridiculous things to be able to watch. Corey Sandhagen and TJ Dillashaw is one of those fights. I usually don't talk about fights that are 2 weeks away. This today is like, I don't even know what today's date is. We're still in April. This fight's on May 8th. Good God, I'm ready for it. I am ready for Corey Sandhagen versus TJ Dillashaw. The return of Dillashaw, Corey Sandhagen, who is a problem. Corey Sandhagen is the definition of a problem. Okay, enough said. Not enough said. Corey Sandhagen, flying knee finish over Eddie Alvarez or Frankie Edgar. TJ Dillashaw, absolute legend, champion, great performances in his career. Corey Sandhagen, spinning heel kick over Marlon Moraes. This is going to be fireworks. I never talk about fights 2 weeks away. I'm going to talk about it again next week, but I feel like this is just something that I had to get out of my body and into this microphone. Because Corey Sandhagen versus TJ Dillashaw could go down as an all-time great fight. This is a fight after Corey Sandhagen. After Corey Sandhagen knocked out Marlon Moraes, I sat here, the same desk, same chair, same microphone. I sat here, didn't even have this yet. Didn't have the flag. Nice little decoration back there. I sat here and I said, give Corey Sandhagen TJ Dillashaw. They didn't do it. They gave him Frankie Edgar. Corey sent him into a new dimension. And then they came to, and I sat here again. I think I had the flag at this point. Some progression here. And then they made the fight. And good God, I'm ready for it. I'm here for it. TJ Dillashaw versus Corey Sandhagen. This bantamweight division is pumping. Good Lord, I'm excited. My adrenaline's pumping, sitting here thinking about Corey Sandhagen versus TJ Dillashaw. Good Lord, I'm ready. So, you know what? That was the last thing I had to talk about Didn't really need to talk about it, but I felt like I had to, if you know what I'm saying. So thank you for watching the 26th episode of the Head Kick KO podcast. Make sure you come back for next week. Next week, we're going to be looking at this card, Yiri Prochazka versus Dominic Reyes. We just talked about it. Next week, I'll be giving you my thoughts, and then I'll be giving you my preview for Corey Sandhagen versus TJ Dillashaw. I'll have a prediction in there. I'll talk about the other fights on the card because I haven't done that yet. I just talked about the main event. But they didn't just give you an all-time great main event in terms of fight night. This is an all-time great fight night main event. They didn't just give you an all-time great fight night main event and then give you some scraps with it. There's some fun fights on this card as well. I'll talk about it next week. I'll talk about any other news we had next week. If we got news on Nick Diaz, I'll tell you about it. If we got news on Kamaru Usman, I'll tell you about it. If we got any other news, I'll tell you about it. Because I make sure to tell you about the news. So, thank you for what. Before we sign off here, make sure you go follow my Twitter. Headkick KO Pod on Twitter. Tweet a lot. If you have questions, anything you want to talk to me about, shoot me a DM, add me in something. If you have a really good question, I'll talk about it on the podcast. So, don't be afraid. Shoot me a follow and interact with me on Twitter. If you're on TikTok, Headkick KO Podcast on TikTok. Okay? I post my full fight predictions with a more analytical viewpoint on TikTok, and I give you some immediate reactions. Right after the card ended last night, I gave you my immediate reactions to UFC 261, and I give you some other things that I see throughout the week that I feel like I need to talk about. If there's ever something that I feel like I have to talk about it, I load up TikTok and post a video on there. So make sure you go follow me on TikTok as well, and thank you for watching this episode of the Head Kick KO podcast.